We know that you were born magical. We know that you are intuitive, and we know that you are brimming with everyday enchantment. Here at the Sisters Enchanted, we believe in intention, we believe in intuition, and we believe in everyday magic. Welcome in to the Expedition to Soul podcast. Welcome into this episode of the Expedition to Soul podcast. I'm Sarah, founder of the Sisters Enchanted, and I am joined today by the always lovely, my other favorite Sarah in the world, Sarah Milne, our program director and astrologer extraordinaire here at the Sisters Enchanted. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you on this day?
I am very good, thank you. Yes, on this day.
Sarah and I were just discussing how we are keeping warm during chilly times.
Yeah, I revealed this is my secret weapon. It's with me all the time these days.
Yeah, Sarah's got a
on my
hot
knee.
Water bottle over there.
Yeah, because as we all across the world, energy is going up, and that's my secret weapon. I don't put my heating on during the day. I just keep this hot water bottle. So every time I make a cup of tea, I refill that as well. So drinking tea and having that on my knee. It's a little poetry.
It's an interesting thing. So what we're going to talk about today is some things people might be doing wrong when they're doing shadow work. And this is kind of I'm loosely connecting this conversation to that right now, because one of the things that we talk about a lot in shadow work in our holistic witchery program, it tends to come up is why are we doing the things we're doing, And you and I are talking about saving money in our electricity. And instantly I had this thought that was like, yeah, but because I was saying too, how electric rates have risen and oil, because we have oil at my house. And so at my office, it's my electric bill has gone up and the thing's always pumping. And then at home we have oil, which the price has gone up. And then obviously, electricity related to all that and whatnot. But I immediately start to think, well, don't I just want to be comfortable in my own house? And isn't that caring and whatnot? But then I was like, yes. And though, if I could just wear 2 long sleeve shirts, maybe not spend that money as much on those expenses, what could I do with that money? Like, could I invest it somewhere to make more money? Or could I go on a really cool trip just because I turn the heat down a little bit and just put on a sweatshirt?
It's true. And I think you get used to since I moved down here to Hastings, this house is old and there's a lot of work I have to do very soon. So because it's damp, and so no matter how much heating I put on, it's still cold. So you think, well, I'm wasting money just pumping heat into, and then it's just escaping straight out through the damp and through the windows that need replacing. And you actually get used to being comfortable at a different temperature.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why we want to think about shadow work is why are we, are we just saying like, oh, I'm just being stingy and don't want to pay for it? Or is there an actual reason? Like in Sarah's case, it really is just a waste because of this work that needs to be done. And I can actually relate to that because my house is not that old comparatively. It was built in the 1950s, but it needs a lot of repair that we've yet to do. So we have some like doors that aren't sealed properly that need replacing. And if you stand by them, it's just freezing cold. And we've done all the things to try to but they're the doors we come in and out of. So we can't just seal them. So it just kind of is what it is. So we have some of that too. And then when I just think like, oh, well, I would rather, like, we love to go out to dinner in our family. So I'd rather go out to eat and spend lavishly on whatever without thinking about it and just bundle up a little more.
That's exactly it. And like, when you think about why are we doing the things we're doing, I mean, you just like it, and habit comes into it so much. And like, so I'm cold, I'm going to put on the heating. And then actually, but am I actually much warmer? No, I'm not. But if like I'm cold, okay, so I'm going to put on my dressing gown, as we call it in the UK, but house coat, I think you call it in the States. I'm going to put on my snuggly, fleecy house coat, and I'm going to boil my hot water bottle, and I'm going to hold that and wrap around. And actually, now I'm warm. I'm actually warm, and I'm saving money to doing some of the things I actually want to do, and I am not adding to the pollution in the environment either.
Yeah.
So
See? We just
I
tied this
just
right
keep
in.
thinking, why do I do what I do? Why do I put the heating on? Is there any other option? Actually, this works better and makes me feel like a lot cozier too.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
See? We're talking shadow work already.
we
Um,
are.
well, right now we are hosting our free Expedition to Soul class. So if you're not
Mm,
registered for that, you can still join and watch the videos, participate, and get everything out of it. The videos will be up for a few days even after the class ends. So you'll have plenty of time to watch. So be sure to check that out at expeditiontosoul.com. But if you're wondering what all this shadow work is about and
mm,
why we're talking about this question of why we're doing things, this ties into shadow work, and our Expedition to Soul class that's happening
mm,
now. Again, it's free, might help you even figure out, what is it that you want to do. I'm talking
mm,
about going out to eat food. And Sarah, I know, wants to make these repairs on her home. And Sarah lives in
mm.
this great new place for her. It's starting to become not so new, but it's
It is, yeah,
new-ish still. And like
yeah,
there's lots to explore. And I know
yeah.
Sarah wants to come over here to the US, and kind of
Yes,
thinking like, what do
yes.
you want to be doing? And
Mm,
how are the things you're doing now, or the beliefs you're holding, get you there? And so
mm,
the Expedition to Soul class we're hosting can kind of help you gain some clarity if you don't even know what that is. So be sure to check that out.
absolutely.
Um, so we're going to talk about shadow work. Shadow work is this idea that you look at your shadows. So it's
Yeah.
the things that are hidden within you, sometimes buried pretty deep down. You really
Mm,
don't even, you would look at them and say, that's not me at all, but
yeah.
really it is you. And it's bringing that up and just looking at it. But
Mm,
people get really caught up in this idea that shadow work must be something hard or heavy or like dark in some way.
mm,
None of that is really the case. But if you already are doing shadow work, we want to talk about some things you might not be doing well or could do a little different. Right, Sarah?
yes. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's like kind of this big, scary, like shadow work. It's making me so dark and feeling bad and all that kind of stuff. But I think really shadow work is just about kind of like what makes me uncomfortable. What is it about other people? That's my big one. What is it about other people that are irritating me, and why? What am I what am I like putting out in the world, and what's coming back at me? And it's interesting because classic example, my daughter and I, we have this ability to get on incredibly well, the best you could possibly get on with each other, and then winding each other up, and like really, really like when we're at our worst, it's kind of like awful. And then one day we looked at our astrology charts, and we were like, okay, interesting. Everything lines up. We have the same ascendant, and every single house is the same sign. And as we know in astrology, each sign has a light and a shadow. So that explains it. So in every single situation of life, I am seeing in my daughter, and she is seeing in me, myself at my best and myself at my worst. So when she makes me angry, she makes me like nobody else quite makes me so kind of like angry and disappointed and hurt when she's being like, as everyone is, and especially growing up as a teenager. And that's because I am seeing my worst self reflected back at myself in every single situation of life. So
Yeah.
I'm not with her or disappointed in her, I am in myself.
Yeah. I I love that you brought that up, because one of the things that I had on my list of things to talk about was with shadow work. When we sit down to think like, why is this happening to me, or how did I
Mm,
get here, what do I need to learn? I think that a tendency for people is to get really stuck in analyzing
mm,
the thing that happened, like
yeah,
who said what, why did I
yes,
do what I do? And that's not what shadow work is. It's the underlying you-ness, your attachment to what you wanted to have happen, the
mm,
stories that you bring in. And so I love what you mentioned about astrology and your daughter, because if you had, like a big argument, and you hang up on each other on the phone, and then you sit down and think, I'm going to process this, and just start writing about, well, she shouldn't have said this, or she really needed to listen to me. That's not
yeah.
shadow work. That's
No,
just
no, no, no,
like analyzing. But what you're
no.
doing, looking at the astrology bit, is you're really starting to understand, just, oh, I see how I think this way, and I see how she did something that I've also done in the past, and
Yes.
maybe I feel a little embarrassed about, and I don't
Mhm.
like that she's doing it. And that's making me, react in this way.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And it's not, there's no point the pair of us sitting down and in that example and saying, "Oh, right, it was you because you did that and you said that when I was one." Our biggest shadows do come from when we are children. A lot of our shadows come from it, but there's no point like, well, what made you say that to me when I was 4 and that hurt me, and I'm now going to blame you because you said that when I was. It's interesting. The more shadow work I do, the better my relationships are with my family, and I don't have to say, "Mum, you said this to me once," and it was really. It's just like I get it. It's just, you acted like that because of your shadows, and then that impacted on my shadows. But you know what? I don't carry that shadow anymore, so I've forgiven you. It's like without even having to have difficult conversations, where you have
Yeah.
to sit down and say, "Look, this hurt." It's just like it's gone. It's gone. It's not even an issue anymore.
Mhm, and that was exactly another thing. It's just solely looking at so the first thing was kind of analyzing what just happened, like
Mhm.
overanalyzing the situation. That's
Yeah.
not shadow work. That's just
No.
dwelling and
Yes.
overanalyzing.
Yeah.
And then the other that you just mentioned is the past, is
Mhm.
really like replaying the past. And with shadow work, we can certainly look at the past. Like I might look at my childhood and say, oh, yeah, that really hurt me. So I can see why I'm feeling the way I feel right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then once you see the why, it's up to you to say, but that's not happening right now. And I'm in control of my own path forward. And
Exactly.
then
And I love
moving.
the way you separated their rumination, like they're just dwelling on things, dwelling. And a lot of people do that, start doing shadow work, and they just bring things up. And I've done it in the past before. You just bring things up and then you spend time brooding on it. And then you get even more down. That's when people say, oh,
Yes.
shadow work makes me feel down because you're just brooding on stuff. I mean, as you know, I'm a Jungian psychologist as well. And then Carl Jung, his idea of shadow work wasn't just to sort of, it was all about integrating that into this individuation, which is this idea when we become complete and a whole person and our self is complete. You have to learn the lessons. And without shadows, we wouldn't be able to learn those. Like, shadows are really important to learn those lessons.
Mhm.
So it's about bringing things up and like, what can I learn from that? Like, what not I'm just going to sit and ruminate on how awful that felt over and over and over again. I'm like, okay, so what lesson did I learn? Okay, I learned that I felt lousy because I was put down. So how can I now be more assertive so that next I don't have to feel lousy, I can feel more assertive. Like one of my biggest things I get told all the time is I say I can't stand people that are arrogant. That's my biggest thing. I don't like arrogance. And the amount of times my ex through my child says, yeah, but dad just says that you don't like arrogance because you have no self-esteem, and it's not arrogance, it's just confidence, and you lack confidence, so you don't like people, you call it arrogant. And it's like, how dare you call my shadow how dare you? But he's right. I had a real thing for many years about arrogance, but it probably was people that were confident in themselves because I wasn't. So
Yeah.
it's my shadow coming out, like, well, I want to be more like that. So finally I had to like swallow the fact that my ex was calling my shadows out and to say, okay, so how can I feel more confident in myself, rather than keep dwelling on how much I can't stand half the population.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought that up because I see that in my relationship where I get really, really mad at my husband for the way he talks to our kids.
Mhm.
And sometimes I do think like like maybe he can soften a little, be a little more
Mhm.
just like a positive reinforcement can happen. But I also see that the times I get the most upset at him is when he just loses his temper. And then I realized a few months back that like I do that too though, like
Mhm.
really lose my cool and then I feel so ashamed after. And that when
Mhm.
he does it, I get so mad at him that I'm like, I can't live with you if you're going to be this way and all these things. And then I realize that I'm just so ashamed of when I do that, that I'm attaching that to now pointing out how evil he is.
Yeah.
Um, and I had to realize that about myself. And then looking at astrology too,
Mhm.
recently I was looking at, because my North Node is in Taurus, and your North Node is where you're headed in your life. Well, my
Yeah.
North Node's in Taurus. My husband's Chiron is in Taurus in his fourth house. So that's like family home stuff, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah.
then my daughter is a Taurus moon, and my son's a Taurus sun.
Yeah.
So
Well,
putting all this together in terms of shadow work and looking at that astrology, I had this big moment where I was like, oh my gosh, my husband with his Chiron in that family house area, and his family growing up, his life was pretty good. Like he had a
yeah,
regular mom and dad situation. They worked and they didn't like worry for anything. But his mom has a lot of unprocessed trauma. She's very traumatic life experiences. And I can see how that would have made her anxious or abrasive in some situations that has made my husband anxious and abrasive in some situations. And seeing all this together and all of that layered, like my where I need to go in this life, plus what he can't heal about himself, plus my daughter's emotions and the way my son is in the world,
yeah,
I was like, no wonder we're just this like ball of Taurus people trying to find trying
yeah,
to find where we
yeah,
fit. But that helped so much in understanding the shadow of that, where, so I was getting so mad at him for the things I was ashamed of in myself, but then also seeing where that's a real struggle for him to kind
yeah,
of heal that home step. And that helped so much with my shadow work, looking at what's happening right now and
yeah.
just what changes can we make to set us up for a better tomorrow. Think about what life would look like if you had the foundation to do the shadow work, understand where you're holding yourself back, and the confidence to bring some everyday magic elements into your life, follow your intuition, and know exactly the steps forward for you. Well, that's what we teach you and more in our Holistic Witchery program. Be sure to get on the wait list for Holistic Witchery. It's the one class we think everybody should take here at the Sisters Enchanted. It has changed so many lives and is at the core of all of our fundamental beliefs about who we are and how we propel ourselves forward in a way that makes great change for ourselves and those around us. Check out holisticwitchery.com, get on the wait list, and we can't wait to welcome you into class just as soon as enrollment opens.
Absolutely. And looking at the chart in that way is so super useful. It's making me think about my chart, how my chart plays out, because interestingly, I think one of the when we say about things that are like normal, when you say normal parents and normal life, like everyone sort of thinks like, I think that's another problem with shadow work where you might be getting it wrong as well, is that going into childhood, but my parents were great. My home life was great. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't traumatic. So my shadows can't be there. And I don't want to blame my parents, and people worry about that.
Mhm.
So they blame their parents, but it's just normal. That's where shadows come from. So I remember one thing that was said to me that caused a big shadow and probably relates to what I was saying about people being arrogant and then my Chiron as well. And I've never really thought about my Chiron. I've never really worked out exactly. Well, I have thought about it a lot, but I've never worked out exactly where it is. And I think I've suddenly got an insight into my Chiron. Is that my mum was told by our headmaster at school when we were both, my brother and I were both in primary school together. She was said, make sure you send Chris to the boys' school and Sarah to the girls' school, because if you send them to the same mixed high school, then all the teachers are going to call Chris Sarah's brother, and all the kids are going to call Sarah Chris's sister, because basically saying Sarah's a swot and studious and he's sociable. So like to me that was just like, so I don't get on with people. So I can see now like he was confident and I wasn't, and I was like a very booky girl. And interesting, my house 4 is full of stuff, and it's ruled by Scorpio, so it's very deep, and all the shadows in there and stuff like that, and things struggling to get to the surface, lots of that going on. Nearly all my planets are there. And my Chiron, interestingly, is in house 9, which is the house of education and study in Aries. So that struggle, like Chiron is that it was the senator that got wounded, and then he's mortally wounded, but he was immortal, and then he swapped his death. If you go back to the mythology, he gave up his immortality and became up in the stars in the sky, and
Mhm.
Chiron's up there, and he is the wounded healer. He kind of like brought medicine to the gods and to humanity, and symbolizes this idea that to be a healer you have to have experienced hurt yourself to want to be able to become a healer. And it still stands. That's why counselors and you have to do the therapy yourself to be able to do it. But in the chart, it shows us kind of where our deepest wound is that we quite often can't even look at because it's so painful for us. But what we tend to do is try and heal other people. So we get attracted to other people who have the similar sort of problems, and we try and heal them. And so again, that's another problem with shadow work. Things we do wrong in shadow work is trying to heal everybody around us. My mum said to me when I moved down here, like, I'm on my own, I haven't got a partner in a minute. She goes, well, I'm glad, because you've always ever attracted men that have never been happy for anything you've done. They've always wanted to bring you down, not boost you up. And again, that's kind of like relates to those shadows. That's because my Chiron was just constantly like, I'll help you feel more better about yourself. I'll give you some self-esteem.
Yeah.
I'll drain my own in the process.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
Astrology is such a helpful tool in looking at your shadow stuff.
Yeah.
But even if you don't know astrology, I mean, just the few things you can do is don't get stuck over analyzing a situation, because that's
Yeah.
not shadow work, like we said before. That's
No.
just dwelling and
Mm.
and being stuck on it. Really getting stuck in the past. Like Sarah was just sharing her stories from childhood, and and even if you have all of these things where you can say, oh, my life was so great, there's nothing that should be impacting me. There is somebody said something or like you perceived something. What I think of is like the typical, not so much now, but maybe in the 70s or 60s, like the 4-person family, the mom, dad, 2 kids, where everything seems fine, but like mom doesn't handle the finances at all. Dad does.
Mm.
And even if everything's hunky dory fine, nobody argues, you felt supported. Maybe now you have that in your mind where it's like, oh, well, it's not my place to understand finances, or I don't even know how to begin to understand finances. And so I just don't ask. And then I don't really know. Like that's a shadow thing.
Yeah.
How to block that down and say, hey, actually, this is my place and I can know and I will know. So it doesn't have to be. I think too, that's another thing that we tend to look for these like very traumatic experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for some of us, those do exist. And sometimes it can just be one thing you witnessed, one thing you saw that you somehow internalized, and that is playing into what you think you have to be or do or say, that's holding you back in some way from being your fullest, most authentic self. And that's the thing. You just got to see, oh, it was that moment, and then move forward from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, my shadows were not caused by deep trauma. It was like there was another related one where my mum was told once to play up my brother's academic achievements and play down mine a bit because I was kept achieving and he was losing his confidence. That was in the same school we were in together. And so I then had to level up, and it was just like, so I have to keep being even better and even better and even better do I to actually get the praise. And I still do this. I still like my godmother she's my mum's age and she lives near here where I've just moved to. She said to me like about going, just simple things like going cold water swimming every day. Like, well, you haven't got to prove anything to anyone, have you? If you don't want to go, don't go. If you're cold, it's too cold. Because I was joking about how cold it is. And it's true. Like I'll get into something like, well, to start running again, and I want to join the club, and I've got 3 different books, big fat books about how to train properly. It's like, what? Still having that need to like not just enjoy it, but be good at it.
Yeah.
And, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that is a shadow that needs to be addressed.
No, that's true. And as a person, I have had some very traumatic experiences, but it's interesting in that where I am in life now is I can see them as traumatic experiences. And I can see like that was an experience and it had nothing to do with me, who I am. It had to do with the people who did the things they did in those situations. And I happened to be there of
Yes.
no fault of my own.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how I'm able to see that, but it is the little things. Like I had this, my college boyfriend who we'd been together for 3 years, and he was an engineering major. He's a few years older than me, so he was already out of school, and he was in engineering. So he was very like smart mathematically, and I was getting my English degree, and I had been offered this job that it was with a company that it was a sales position, and I could work at any of the open spots in the country. So wherever there was an open spot for that position, and they were all over the country, like
Mm.
they weren't hard to come by. I could go there. And at the time that I had been offered the job, I didn't have to pick. I could wait if I wanted to stay where I lived. I would just be on the list essentially. And like if a job opened up where I lived, then
Mm.
I'd be the person they called. But the nearest one to us was like a 3 hour, 3.5 hour drive. And I was like, well, maybe I should just say yes to that because it's there and it's guaranteed. And I remember him looking at me and saying, why don't you just get a nice retail job? Because
Mm.
I started working when I was 16 in the mall and was a manager by 17 and never stopped working. I've been working full time since I was 17. And I remember him just looking at me, and I can so clearly picture it. We were standing in the entryway of his parents' house, and just with this like look on his face, like, why would you, you know, just get this nice
Mm.
retail job? And I remember in that moment feeling this like fire of like, I'll show you
Mm.
a nice what he's
Mm.
considering. And I did go on to work more retail after that. And that could be a great career. But the way he was saying it,
Yeah.
as if like that was not, I don't know. And I just remember this fire burning. But I can see that now when I perceive myself as maybe not succeeding or failing at something where I
Yeah.
like that flash of like, I will I will prove this wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's interesting you say because 'cause I've had some big traumas in life too, but funnily enough, I don't feel like they cause shadows because, like you
Yeah.
were saying, I've been able to like, well, that was just so horrible and bad, and, maybe it's because you feel like I don't know, I think some people, they might cause shadows, but for me, it was just like it was like it's been those little things. One of the biggest shadows is like when you were the last to be picked for PE, like we used to have picked teams,
Yeah.
like and they would like I'd be left and because I was asthmatic and couldn't breathe properly as a child and was really unsporty, and people would just leave me till last and then be like, oh, we've got Sarah, no, come on then, and I'd just be like, oh, and there'd be this groan, the whole team, and they're just like, how that humiliating.
Yeah, it's so humiliating.
So that's kind of like that led into a lot of shadows, and I think that links to like another thing people like might get wrong. It's about the feeling. I think it's really important when you're doing shadow work, because how do I want to feel, like how, like, so I feel I suppose at those moments rejected and unappreciated and embarrassed. So obviously those are things, maybe that's then fed into like lack of self assertion, because I might have felt growing up then, but I don't want to feel embarrassed by putting myself out there because that I'm used to being so embarrassed. So, it's that kind of like, so how do I want to feel? Like, I think if you go back to those stories, if I go back to myself on the hockey pitch, never getting picked for the team or whatever, and so how did it feel? Rather than like, oh, those horrible girls, they were really nasty to me. How did it feel? And how could I change in my mind the way that young child felt so that
Mhm.
she'd like, just replace that feeling in the story,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
I wonder hearing us talk if it's not because we've done so much shadow work and learned
Mm,
about our astrology and done all the
mm,
things we've done, and you have your you went to school for to understand psychology
yeah,
and people, and I wonder if it's not because we put all of this together that for us the stuff that's left are these little things. I'm picturing
yeah,
it in my mind as if
yeah,
you're trying to, if you've ever tried to organize a room, like I think about this with my kids' bedrooms. They've got so many
yes,
little bits and pieces and Lego
yeah, yeah,
pieces. It's really easy to see the big things, like the big
mm,
toy, the big stuff that's taking
mm,
space, and move those out. That's like
yes,
our big traumas. It's easy to see
yes,
them and we can move them. And what's left is all the Lego pieces, all the
yeah,
little
yeah,
like odds and ends, like the Barbie shoes that there's just puzzle pieces everywhere. And
right,
that's what takes, you get the big stuff out in no time. And what's left,
yeah,
um, just that's what takes you the whole rest of the day, and you never really get it organized. You just put it into a box
yeah.
somewhere for later.
What I'm thinking with that is if you go back to Carl Jung's idea that we can't just like throw our shadows away. We have to to learn to integrate them into ourselves. Like they're really important. What we've learned from them, and they are stories. They might not be stories we want to look at, or parts of ourselves, that shadow self, we might not want to look at it, but we have to integrate it into the rest of us. And I'm thinking all those little bits, like when I tidy a room, I end up with those bits like all over the floor, or sometimes I put everything on the bed and then you've got bits on the bed. And what do? I know what I tend to do with those bits is I scoop them all up, and I'm just too tired and fed up with it now, and put them in a bag and chuck them in the back of a cupboard.
Yeah.
And then when I came to move house, it's like these end up getting thrown away, because like, oh, look at all this stuff. I haven't, So that isn't integrating them, is it? The big things we integrate. We either give them a new home, or we change their place in the home. Whereas all those bits, they get shoved into that bag and shoved back into the dark corner. So actually, they are the bits that we forget about. So one of the big mistakes people can make in shadow work is to only focus on the big things and leave those little things. But we've just been saying how some of those little things are the things that really like stick in the mind and impact the stories you tell about yourself.
Yes. That was such a great circle, a great ending to come to there for us.
That was really
So we talked about 3 things just to wrap them up. Not just over analyzing something that happened like recently, maybe you got into an argument or you wish you didn't say something. That's not shadow work. That's over analyzing. The other thing is just really getting stuck in the past, like, oh, I can't believe this thing happened in the past. This person did this person said this, and I'm just like, you're just really deep in the past. The point is to see that and acknowledge what that's bringing to you today. And then now what? Being stuck in the past is not helpful. And then I guess our last thing here is ignoring the bits, ignoring the leftover stuff, and just tucking that away because it seems so small and insignificant. But those are the hardest things to deal with, and they leave the biggest mess at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I'll be using that for sure.
Yes, the best thing,
So
the bits left on the floor. Yeah.
just deal with the bits. And if you're not registered for Expedition to Soul, that's happening right now. It's our free 5-day class. We've had 100,000 people take this class over the years. It's really, really good. Many people do it again and again. And you can register for that at expeditiontosoul.com. If you have not yet signed up, it's totally free. So get your magical patootie in that class. And yeah, well, thank you, Sarah, for hanging out.
Thank you. It was fun as
Talking
always.
shadows. Yeah, so good. All right. Well, until next time, we hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Expedition to Soul podcast.
Yes. Bye.